Good afternoon, everybody. Just want to welcome you to the webinar that we have scheduled for today. It looks like we have a pretty good group, and wondering if everybody can hear me. If you can maybe just reply in the chat if you can hear me. All right, well, I will presume that everybody can hear me. Again, you can write in the chat any questions that you might have during the webinar presentation here. And I guess let's begin with aircraft cost calculator and what it's all about. As you can see, here's our marketing website for the application. This is where we sell the application itself, so it's totally web hosted on the cloud. You can also access the application from any device, iPad, iPhone, any Android device as well. No CD-ROM, no installing, and it's quite convenient. You'll see here there's a login screen, so you just simply click that. And I'm going to go ahead and enter in my log information. And as I'm logging in here, feel free to answer or send any questions that you might have to us while we're going through the webinar here via the chat, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. Try to keep this to about 30 minutes. First thing here that I want to show you all is we have live chat help here. So as you're using the application, somebody in my office will always be available to answer questions live 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So that's a new feature that we've recently added. You can close that out and simply put it down in the lower left hand corner. So here's the main data screen, or excuse me, the main home page of the application. You'll see that we have recent sessions, ACC news, and frequently asked questions. The ACC news is tied to our blog. We keep very up to date on the blog, so I'd encourage you guys to take a peek at it and enjoy some of the posts that we have. Over on the left side here, you'll see recent sessions that I have saved. This is another feature of ACC where I can save specific sessions for different clients and always come back to them and not have to start from scratch. So you'll see that I've already set up a webinar demo session here, and it'll take a second to pull up. And again, I'm presuming everybody can hear me. Looks like we have a couple of questions coming in. We'll get to those here in a minute. So here's the main data screen of the application. We have 3 airplanes in the session, but I want to show you how we simply add more aircraft to the session if you wanted to. So our aircraft of 350 plus in the database is arranged by turboprops all the way up to large jets, and then we also just added single engine piston and twin engine piston aircraft. You'll see that we also have fractional jets in the database. So if I wanted to add, for example, an XLS Plus to the session that I already have, I'll just simply select it and add it to the session. You'll see here on the aircraft selection screen that we give typical passenger capacity, seats full, range, normal cruise speeds, and average pre-owned pricing. We update the average pre-owned pricing on a quarterly basis, taking in several different sources from controller and ASO and some of the other Blue Books and VREFs of the world. And now I'm just simply going to continue to the calculator. Now, the first question that I will answer is, where do we get our data from? You'll see that I just pulled up a PDF here of some emails, and these emails, I'm getting the data from the NBAA Airmail Forum. So I'll put out a broadcast to all the citation operators and owners, and this was an example of me asking, does anybody have any good insight for good average numbers to use for planning gallons per hour burned on Excel, assuming some different missions? And you can see this pilot got back to me with different stage lengths, different altitudes, and different fuel burns being burnt. Here's another CJ4 email. So really, the NBAA forum has been fantastic in helping us get the real world operational numbers. Obviously, we also do look at the OEM numbers and other sources, but in terms of fuel burns and maintenance programs, things of that nature, we found that the air mill system has been great, and we take an average of those. Here's a Phenom 300. Here's some information directly from Cessna in terms of labor costs, part costs, engine reserve numbers, etc. Here's a G4 SP where I found out, what the hourly rate was for the Rolls-Royce Corporate Care. It's actually a monthly program based on 400 hours, and you do the math. Here's an APU number. ESP we look at. Again, the OEMs. This is a Gulfstream G350 in terms of speeds, range, takeoff distances, things like that. This is Dassault publicly available information in terms of fuel consumption on the 7X. I'm a pilot as well, so these charts don't scare me too much. I can interpret them, and we look at those and comprehend the data. Here's another Sovereign versus Citation 10. This was kind of an interesting post. So I won't spend a lot of time here on this, but to finish up here, here's the pilot training numbers. We look at flight safety, Simucom, some other sources. So we'll be happy to send you any of this data afterwards. But the point is we get it from a lot of different sources and look at an average of those sources. But the heart of ACC is really the flexibility of the application in terms of being able to get serial number specific or scenario specific. So you'll see here on the upper left, we have 4 aircraft in the session. And you'll see we have 3 columns going across. This left-hand column deals with which airplanes are in the session, some basic data on that specific aircraft, and then we have a payment schedule box where we can enter loan information or look at capital cost scenarios. The middle column here deals with our general parameters and owner hours and charter hours. This is one thing that really separates us from anybody else out there, is the fact that we can put in specific hours flown versus using a fleet average. And we can also pre-populate numbers for charter.
Where'd you find them at?
So if a client wanted to know what charter could do to his hourly cost to offset his DOCs, we can easily show that. And as we go further into this, I'll show you some of those examples. Owner hourly cost analysis. These are basically the variable costs of the airplane. So for the Sovereign, you'll see that we pre-populate the airplane is going to burn on average 285 gallons an hour.
King for our
We pre-populate airplane maintenance
shams.
on that airplane of $155
we had the smaller ones in there, so I bought some
engine
the other
reserves
day
of
at Kohl's. They were $14 each.
Over on the annual fixed cost side of things, you'll see basically fixed costs, what we're all pretty familiar with. And again, if there's any more questions that are coming in,
I like that store.
Please send them. Our annual fixed costs: crew expense, crew training, hangar, insurance, aircraft miscellaneous, management, marketing fees. Let's talk about some of these items that are fully editable by the application themselves. Looking at the Citation Sovereign, you'll see that I've pre-populated some numbers, assuming that this owner was going to fly 325 hours. But let's adjust this for the purposes of the webinar. Let's say he's going to fly 350 hours, Part 91, and the client was interested in doing some charter hours, and instead of 275 hours, maybe the management company is going to give him 200 hours. You'll then see our fuel cost per gallon. We have a drop-down menu here where you can adjust the number accordingly. But we also have a feature here that is next to the fuel cost per gallon where we can edit it. And I can determine what we call the blended cost of fuel. So for example, maybe the owner of this sovereign has a fuel farm and he's paying $4.10 at home, and maybe he's pumping 50%. And on the road, maybe he's paying $7.10. So that would account to 50% on the road to get us a blended cost of fuel of $5.60. So now you'll see our $5.60. Our charter rate, $2,400 an hour. This is the number assumed on the charter rate of what the sovereign would bring to the owner. So for example, I know that a sovereign is chartering out roughly these days for $29.50 an hour. And maybe the owner has a 85-15 split or an 80-20 split with off the retail numbers. So that's why I've put $2,400 into here. But if I wanted to change that to say $2,500 an hour, everything changes. And you'll see some of these numbers down here start to change. All right, so now we have total hours being flown of 550 hours. Let's go down and look at the owner hourly cost analysis a bit. So again, the fuel gallons being burned are 285 gallons, but maybe a company or an operator flies the airplane at a little different, slower speed, maybe 0.80 instead of average cruise of 0.85 Mach. So maybe he's going to burn a little less fuel, maybe 265. And you'll see all these numbers start to change accordingly. Now these airframe and engine numbers, this is another thing where this is where I say you can get serial number specific with the application. So if we're looking at a specific sovereign and that airplane is on Pro Parts or an engine program of Power Advantage or something like that, maybe the airframe Pro Parts contract for that airplane is $200 an hour, and maybe the engine numbers are $320 an hour. So you can get serial number specific, but again, the numbers that we pre-populate are very good averages, and you shouldn't get into any trouble with those numbers that we pre-populate. But it is nice to be able to get that serial number specific option. So now you'll see we have total maintenance of $520. Our crew miscellaneous in part 91. This is an editable box. You'll see that we have crew travel, commissary, catering, airport fees, and other. Again, fully editable box. And if there's any questions, looks like there's a couple more coming in. I'll get to those here shortly. So getting back to our hourly cost analysis, you'll see our total fixed cost without charter would be $3,400 an hour. Our total fixed cost with charter, so that's us taking the 200 hours at $2,500 an hour to give us $3,107 for the fixed cost. And then our total hourly cost without charter would be $56.40. And with charter, it goes down by about $300 to $5,300 an hour. So again, that's the total hourly cost with and without charter. Over on the annual fixed cost side of things, crew expense of $225 for 550 hours. Maybe you're going to have another crew member on board, so maybe that number is going to go up to $285,000 an hour. Our crew training numbers, we pre-populate for one initial, one recurrent. But if both pilots are typed into the airplane, or in this case, the 3 pilots would be typed into the airplane, maybe that number could go down a wee bit to maybe $28,000 an hour, or excuse me, an annual fixed cost of $28,000. Our hangar expenses, $22,000. Again, very subjective as to where you're at. If you're at Teterboro, you're going to be paying closer to $80,000 annually, etc. Insurance numbers, these are all editable as well based on hull value, premiums, liabilities, etc. Aircraft miscellaneous. This is another editable box for subscription, charts, weathers, registration. Annual refurbishment fee. This is a line item where maybe a client wants to lay down new carpet every year into the airplane. So he wants to budget for that. So you could put 50,000 in there, and other maybe that's going to be $4,000 of cups and silverware and soda and pop and booze and all that stuff in the airplane. So again, very dynamic, very editable. And I should mention here, the boxes in yellow are outputs of the application. The boxes in white are the editable fields through ACC. Now, over on the original aircraft cost, I want to talk a little bit about market residual value. So maybe a client comes to you and says, I'm going to pay $9 million for this sovereign, and he wants to know what the airplane is going to depreciate in terms of market value, not maker's depreciation or anything, but just market value. We've all been through a very hard time and the market's been depressed, so we get that question a lot. So maybe you say, okay, we're going to buy that airplane for $9 million. Maybe it's going to depreciate at 2%, although we are flying at 550 hours a year, so maybe it is going to be closer to that 3%. And we know that most owners on the Sovereign will own the airplane for 5 years. So this average value depreciation a year number that just populated of 254,000 is now being accounted for into the hourly cost with and without charter. So this 254,000 is assumed a fixed cost per year, and it's showing him that his hourly cost is going to go up, which makes sense. Now, looking at this 254 times 5, we know that that's roughly 1.2 million over the 5 years. So when he goes to sell it, that airplane may be worth around 8.6, 8.7 in that area, off of the 9.8 average pre-owned price. All right, now I'm going to look at this payment schedule scenario first and show you what a note on the airplane might look like if a client's going to finance. So you can see that I've got 6% as an interest rate, but maybe I'm going to change that to 5.5%. Our payment per period, we could change that. I'll keep it for monthly. Our term of loan, let's change that out to 180 months. And maybe he's going to put down 50% on the aircraft, so that would leave a loan amount of $4.9 million. So now you can see his payment per period is $40,000 and $37.09 for a principal amount of $17,000 and an interest amount of $22,000. If I wanted to know what his payment would be in year 2, I can hit the period number and the numbers all reflect that accordingly. Also want to make note here, within the app, we have a notes section here. So maybe a crew expense, maybe somebody would want to add a flight attendant to the airplane and just add another $50,000 to the salary. You could make a note of that down here and everything would be reported. Now, the scenario that we've just looked at is what I would call a fully loaded operating cost scenario, meaning we've looked at payment involved in the airplane. We've looked at market residual value calculations to be involved in the payment. But maybe some clients don't want to see any of that. Well, that's fine. They just want to see what it's going to cost to operate the airplane. So very simply, I just make the original aircraft cost 0 there. And you'll see these numbers start to drop down. And if I remove the loan, make that 0, you'll see the numbers all just drop significantly. So this is what I would call a whole ownership cash buyer, doesn't care about market residual value. So basically, to operate this airplane, 350 owner hours is going to cost him $1.3 million. Hope that's clear. We've tried to make this as clear as possible. Now I want to show you a couple of the tools that we have in terms of comparison and how this all works. You'll see that I have a Challenger 300 in here and a fractional Sovereign. We'll talk about the fractional aircraft here in a minute, but let's first look at the 300. I've pre-populated basically the same numbers for the Sovereign into the 300. So let's take a look at the comparison. We simply go to Tools, View Comparison, and keep in mind that all of this is very doable on the iPad, on the iPhone. I'll show you some features about that, but you're not tied to your machine. You can be doing this anywhere you have a Wi-Fi connection. So here I'm going to put the Sovereign into the comparison, then I'm going to put the Challenger 300 into the comparison, and right here, if I wanted to put the XLS, I can easily do that. And if I wanted to put the fractional, I can easily do that as well. You can put as many aircraft into a comparison as you want. You're not limited to 3. You can have up to 100 if you wanted and beyond. So that's the feature there. So as you scroll down here, you'll see the 4 airplanes, all with the side-by-side comparison of what's going on. With this, you can export this to Excel as well if you wanted to manipulate the numbers around some more, or take out or remove certain fields. But that's just one of the comparisons that we have. And I'll show you some of the more powerful reporting capabilities here in a second, after we talk briefly about a tool called the Trip Cost Calculator that we've put into the application to help justify and make black and white the cost savings associated with business aviation. So in this example, let's look at the 300 here for a minute. So what we have is what's called the Trip Cost Calculator. And as I go through here, this is going to show the benefits and cost savings associated with private travel versus commercial, including the time of an executive's hourly wage. So maybe this 300 is going to fly a 900 statute mile trip in one day. Maybe we're in Milwaukee, so let's assume maybe they go Milwaukee up to Duluth, over to Charlottesville, Michigan, down to Gary, Indiana, and then back to Milwaukee. So they're going to conduct 4 or 5 meetings in one day, be back the same day. You'll see that we pre-populate the Sovereign to fly at 485 miles per hour. Maybe that's 470, what have you. So that's just under 2 hours of flying. This variable cost per hour, this is pulling from our Challenger 300 that it costs us $2,400 an hour to fly the airplane. So that's a total trip cost to fly the Sovereign, or excuse me, the Challenger 300 of $4,500. Now let's talk and populate and show the benefits of this, of the business aircraft. Maybe we're going to save 15 hours because we can do this all in one day. If we had 2 or 3 executives, we'd probably have to be overnight a couple nights, airline tickets, etc. So maybe we'd have $3,000 of commercial air and overnight expenses. A employee, as we all know, most business aircraft are utilized by mid-level managers, not the CEO, not the top paying candidates. So I can tell you that somebody making $350,000 a year is roughly making $125 an hour. And let's say we put 5 guys or ladies on board the airplane. What's happened here? You can see our all-in commercial trip costs would be $12,375. We can take the Challenger 300 and fly for $4,590, which is a cost savings total of $7,700 or $518 an hour. It's a pretty compelling argument. On this annual operational cost summary, let's just briefly look at this. Fixed costs, this is the Challenger 300 again. For the 300, we had pre-populated of 1.3 million. We have variable costs of 660,000. We were seeing a net charter profit contribution of $66,000. I'm not exactly sure what rate I put in, but that number could go up or down a bit. So it's going to cost this owner $1.8 million to fly the airplane, his 275 hours. Now, if we looked at the Sovereign under the same scenario, as opposed to that fully loaded scenario with the loan and the market residual value, you can see it's a little stronger numbers. So 568,000 of fixed costs, 780,000 of variable. Net profit off the charter is 106,000 to show us a net annual cost of 1.2 million. So for a lot of the operators out there, I think it's important that you can also really clearly show, what airplanes are more efficient and more effective in charter. In this case, it would appear that the Sovereign might be a little more fuel efficient and be a better charter candidate. Briefly here on the same page, we have a maker's depreciation schedule. So if I put in a $9 million purchase price on the airplane, we pre-populate based on 135 rules that the NBAA says you can take. And we have that PDF right here. The maker's schedule, depreciation schedule for business aircraft. For 135, you can take it over 8 years. For 91 operations, you can take it over 6 years. So again, these numbers are all very editable, so CFOs of companies can put in their numbers as they see fit for the depreciation side of things. What I'm going to do now is save this session as webinar 23. So that's just to remind me and you all that you can always save these sessions and come back to them at any time and not have to start completely over from scratch. Now, we've got about 5 more minutes, and I appreciate your time today. Let's show you some of the reporting capabilities of how this all works. So now we've got the 4 airplanes into the session. So let's put the Sovereign, the Challenger 300, and I'm not going to put the XLS in. I'll put it in, and the fractional airplane. I'm going to leave that out because if we have time, I'm going to briefly talk about that calculation, how we come up with that. So now I've got the 3 machines into the report. I'm going to hit all report contents. So you'll see that we have 8 reports to choose from. I'm going to also choose a file for a report image. And I'll also show you the My Account section where you can put in your own company's logo and all the footers and things of that nature. In this instance, maybe it was a single aircraft report and you just wanted to put a picture of the Challenger 300 on it. You could do that. So from here, I'm simply going to hit Create Report. And we've just switched over all of the reporting from PDF and HTML, or PDF and Crystal reporting, to what they call HTML5 reporting, which gives us a couple different advantages. One, we can still download the report as a PDF, but we can also now email this link directly to a client instead of having to send the entire PDF or what have you. And the nice thing about that is if you're on the road, if you're on your iPad, you don't have to download or deal with PDFs. You can just send the link. So you'll see that it opened up my email and there would be the link. But going back to the actual report itself, let's look at it briefly here. You'll see that we have the Sovereign, general parameters, owner hours of 350, charter hours of 200, our blended cost of fuel $5.60. So basically this is pulling all the main data that we've entered into the application and putting it into a very clear, concise format for presentation. Rolling into the second page, we have the annual operational cost summary report. So we have the trip cost calculator with the trip that we put in, annual operational cost summary for fixed costs and variable costs of the entire operation, and we have our monthly budget. Finally, we have our depreciation calculator, which shows the $9 million price with all the pre-populated rates. Then we roll into a spec sheet of the airplane. We have a floor plan diagram. In the coming months, we'll also have interior shots of the airplanes as well as footprint of the airplane for hangar and a cross section of height, things things like that. We have additional aircraft information, typical baggage, capacity, cabin height, width, years in production, average premium pricing, and then again, more specific performance data, so seats full range, ferry range, balance, field length, landing distances, fuel usage, etc. Then we roll into the pie chart of where all these costs are going. Then we roll into a bar chart. Again, you wouldn't have to pick and choose all of these reports, but I did it just so you could see the complete report. Here's another aircraft report that's we call the single aircraft report. So you could just select this report if the client didn't need to see, all of these other pages. You could just see one-page expense report. And then the following page here is the Challenger 300 with all the same data, spec sheet unique to itself. Another single aircraft report for the Challenger 300. And then the XLS. And we probably have the fractional in here as well. Now I want to show you the side-by-side comparisons that we do. So the last two pages here are the side-by-side comparisons. We've got the Sovereign, the 300, and the XLS. You'll see this comparison details the economics of the airplane, what it's going to cost with and without charter. And I should mention that if you didn't want to do any charter, you would just simply leave charter as 0, and it could be a pure 91 operation. And then the last comparison page deals with showing side-by-side different aircraft information. So cabin heights, cabin volume, baggage, and performance data right here. And we'll be sure to send you this report when we're done here. So you'll see that it's a pretty powerful tool, and we've done pretty in-depth analysis on 3 airplanes in just under 30 minutes. I do want to show, you probably don't deal with fractional, you might after you see the calculator here for fractional aircraft, and to be able to show the expense associated with fractional aircraft. So I'm just going to click on the Sovereign fractional aircraft. And this is off of one of the premier providers of fractional ownership. So we're looking at a Sovereign. Maybe he's going to fly 100 hours, buy a share for 100 hours. I know that the hourly cost on that airplane is roughly $2,600 an hour. Oops, that's $26,000. There you have an hourly fuel surcharge these days of around $750 an hour. So you'll see his total hourly cost is $58.82 to fly the Sovereign 100 hours a year. But that is also including a lot of annual fixed costs. They have $10,000 a month for a management fee. If I would change that, maybe somebody can then negotiate down to $8,000. That number from 120 just went to 96,000. Well, that's adjusted into his hourly cost. Management fee, that's taking the 8,000 times 12. Other, maybe they're going to hit you with $9,000 of catering over the course of the year, cars, transportation, etc. But the really nice thing is we can also say, well, this client might pay $1.1 million for that share of the airplane. And this is where it gets interesting. We know that these airplanes fly quite a bit. So instead of the standard 2 to 3% market residual value, I'm going to say it's closer to 14% over a 5-year contract period, which this provider does have. So you'll see he's taking about $116,000 loss a year. So now his hourly cost is $63.35. I should also mention what we've already done here is included a payment schedule. So maybe he was going to borrow $500,000 on the $1.1 million purchase price. So that's being accounted for. But if he just pays cash for the airplane fractional share and make that doesn't even matter, you'll see his cost come down to $4,500 an hour. So what you could do with this is you could compare this to a whole ownership Sovereign scenario, and I'd be willing to bet that somebody flying 300 hours a year in the Sovereign could probably beat this hourly rate. That's not to say fractional doesn't have its place, or there's not a need for it, but it certainly is probably the most expensive way to fly. but you do have an airplane within 24 hours anywhere in the world. So there's definitely advantages to it. Real briefly here, I just want to hit the My Account section. That's where you can put a lot of your marketing information in terms of contact information, because I think this report and what ACC offers is totally branded with your information. So all of these footers and everything would have your logo, your company name, your address. So from a marketing perspective, I think a client gets these in their hands, sees one, and realizes that maybe he wants to change some things around. You now have one more tool in the toolbox to be able to say, I can run this report showing exactly your scenario. Without charter, with payment schedules, without payment schedules, with residual values, without residual values, on and on. And one final thing I just want to mention is the mobility of the application. It was designed with what we call responsive web design. So you'll see as I collapse my window here, you'll see that it rolls into kind of a different look and feel. And this is how it would show up on your iPhone if you wanted to use it. So these are all drop-down menus. Again, this is what they call responsive web design. And then if I open it back up, this is how it would roll and look on your iPad. So I appreciate the time today. If there's any questions or anything that we can answer for you, I'd love to hear any feedback. If you think this is something that you would look at doing, really like to hear that. Briefly, I should talk about pricing. It really is priceless, but we're offering a webinar special right now. If you sign up, instead of an $1,800 annual subscription fee, we've come down to $1,350 annually. But the other very nice thing about the application is we don't require an annual subscription. You can go month to month, use it when you need it, and that's simply $175 a month. Appreciate all of your time today, and we'll look forward to hearing back. Thank you all.